evaluation, right? How much is the score? It was all on how do we evaluate the teacher, and not enough about how we're going to support teachers, how we're doing professional development, how we're doing professional advancement, right? And so Marion was there as well. I don't want to speak for her, but my sense was I think there were quite a few teachers and some principals in the crowd. Rena Honey was there. Renee Martinez was there. And sometimes those folks come loaded with answers. I think their jaws hit the tables when they heard about all the support that's being planned. It was just amazing. Their questions were no longer about how you're going to support us. It was like, how are you going to be able to make all this happen? Because it was quite the promise. I think it's a lot to deliver, but nevertheless, I think they were. Maybe they'd already seen it, but it was my sense was like, wow.
So that's good to remember that. So there are 10 of us, and there'll probably be 8 tonight, based on who I know to be gone. Debbie's going to be gone. Julie's coming, and I know Jose's on his way. So the others I don't know. But of the 10 of us, I'm going to guess 8 of us heard the superintendent's presentation in September. And then Marion and Jim have been on these advisory panels, so they've gone really deep. Myself, I've seen the presentation that was, the only additional thing I've seen was Milan made a presentation to the board briefing. So I got about, if that gives you an idea. But we haven't gotten into dollars other than compensation, but not impact on the budget.
About component.
have
You guys hear that already?
Sorry?
No, that's the compensation piece.
Oh,
So
that was the compensation.
that was presented at the board.
I was just going to say that I have attended some of the TEI's workshops in the evenings
community?
last year. No, not the community.
Okay.
I was invited to.
The
be on that
input committee. You were on the input.
Yes.
And Lucy and Marion are both retired teachers, principals, administrators, so that's the background they bring. And then we have parents and business people and some former teachers also. So I think we can go ahead and get started. We've got
So I'm Christina Campos. I'm here for Gilbert Prado. He was not able to be here today. And Brian Howard, he just stepped out to the bathroom. He will be giving the portion that Dr. Terry was going to give during the presentation. So we can, if there aren't any other questions, we can go in and start right into the presentation if you guys are okay. And so Milan Sedek will start.
Sounds good. Thanks. And so my name is Milan Sevak, and I'm going to walk you through the first couple components. As we've just discussed, we're going to kind of rush a little bit through the first 2 components. I mean, if there's questions there, we can, answer those kind of at the end. But we want to make sure that we get through component 3, which you'll see in your agenda, on compensation, rewarding excellence, as well as the budget and sustainability piece. Both the pieces of which are especially relevant, for this commission. So that's why we want to make sure we get there. And I want to make sure everyone, on the second page of this packet is the agenda, and that's what I was referencing.
Ben is our newest member. Have you had any exposure to the Teacher Excellence Initiative?
I have not. I believe I came to maybe a presentation, I want to say a few months ago, but that's about it.
All right. So has the least information. So we were talking about what we could skip through because several of us we had the presentation when the superintendent came, and then several members have been to other community meetings. But what we wanted to, so we're going to try and go through the overview, but then spend most of the time on the dollars.
Okay. Sounds good. Great. Well, why don't we jump in? And the PowerPoint, I think, is also in your packet. I think I saw it
It's at the end of
towards
the
the end.
packet.
So if you want to follow along there, it's also on the screen. And so big picture, of course, is our overall objective with the Teacher Excellence Initiative is to improve student learning by improving teacher effectiveness. Sounds simple in that phrasing, but it's immensely complex. and challenging, right, in order to do that at a system the size of Dallas ISD with about 10,000 teachers. Big picture again is we've done a little bit of reframing around this and really defining TEI around three components. One is defining excellence, and that is, as a district, what is our vision for effective teaching and how do we evaluate it? Two is is supporting excellence, how do we most effectively support and differentiate teachers' professional learning? And then three, how do we reward teachers for their professional learning, professional growth and impact on student learning? And so in this presentation, as you've seen, is our agenda is structured around these three components, with the fourth piece around budget implications and sustainability. With that, I'm going to skip over these TEI goals. You guys can take a look at these. Nothing's really new and different here, but it is about obviously assessing teachers fairly accurately and rigorously. And then secondly, about once we have an effective evaluation system, one of our goals is to use that rich information from the evaluation system to actually inform professional learning. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then, of course, really developing a compensation system that also makes use of that information from the evaluation system as well. And so in terms of defining excellence, big picture again is really taking a multi-pronged approach to teacher evaluation. So historically, teacher evaluation systems have just primarily used administrator evaluations, 100% of the evaluation based on what your appraiser thinks of your performance. And based on the research from the MET project as well as a lot of other research in recent years, we've decided to look at three different measures of teacher performance. One is the historical approach of using the appraiser's evaluation using a new rubric that's been actually developed in the district even prior to Mr. Miles getting here over the last 2.5 years. And a second piece is student achievement metrics, and that's a multi-pronged approach, as you'll see. And then third is student surveys. There's 4 components to the evaluation rubric. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you can see the actual draft rubric is actually in your packet as well. And you can see it'll have 4 different domains, and there's more detail in the handout. On the achievement side, we often have spent a little bit more time on this just because it's new. And but as you'll see, it's worth about 35% for most teachers in the district, and that includes, again, multiple measures even within achievement. If you have a STAR assessment, looking at STAR. If you have ACP assessments, those are the semester exams in the district, looking at those exams. And then all teachers have an individual goal piece, which actually is specifically designed to not use standardized assessments. And so we know there's a lot that can be assessed, via not using standardized assessments. And so we want teachers to have that freedom, with the principal review, to design an individual student achievement growth goal. And then a second component that's standardized across all teachers is a school-level STAR results. I want to draw your attention before I leave this slide to that second bullet, and that is our plan is to use the best of 3 measures for an assessment when possible. So what that means is that, as you can imagine, if you're an algebra teacher and you are teaching in a magnet school, you kind of have it made, right? I mean, your students are probably going to score, pretty well on that STAR assessment. And if you're not, at a just traditional high school, I mean, it depends on the students you get. And so what we're saying is that we're actually going to look at growth measures as well, and not only just one measure, and I think we're the only district through my research, and actually 2 different ways of calculating a growth measure. And out of the 3 measures, whichever one you come out to be the best on is the one that's going to count for you. And so it's trying to really equalize the playing field across the district, and to design the most fair system for teachers. Again, if more questions about that, we can go into that. There's a couple other examples here. You'll see an art teacher kind of example as well as an elementary teacher example. But a lot of this has been the same since the fall, so there's nothing really new there. Last thing I'll comment on the achievement templates. We are actually we got some feedback from teacher focus groups in each feeder pattern. We're actually going to put those online and actually let all teachers comment on all these achievement templates. Well, I mean, I guess the ones relevant for them. And then we're going to take that feedback to finalize these achievement templates. With the thinking being is we need as much feedback as we can get, because there are different ways of looking at some of these metrics, and we want that to be as fair as possible. Third component is student surveys. Again, the MET study actually found a very strong correlation between student surveys and teacher effectiveness. Found it actually more reliable than even principal and assistant principal observations. And so that's one of the drivers for including it in this study. In our evaluation as well. Research didn't find any valid and reliable pre-K surveys, so we're not going to do a pre-K survey, and so we're not going to make anything up. And so the plan here is to do and for us to not make up a survey on our own. We're doing a research-based survey so we'll do an RFP, and obviously that has budget implications as well. It's more expensive to do it that way versus develop our own, but we feel it's going to be more fair to teachers if we do it that way. You'll see some sample student survey questions on the slide. And this is just one grade span. They're going to be different by grade span. So as you might imagine, you ask different questions of a kindergarten student than you would a high school student. And so all that rolls up to an overall effectiveness, an evaluation rating. And teachers will have one of 9 different ratings, as you can see on this slide, that goes from unsatisfactory to master teacher. And as you'll see, here it shows different salary levels. I'm going to let Carmen Darville have that conversation with you. But for right now, I just wanted to see the different ratings that teachers will get. Novice teachers start at the novice level, so that hasn't changed in all these months we've been talking about it. And then experienced teachers will be placed at one of 3 different levels. And in special exceptional cases, they'll actually be able to be placed at higher levels, but those are more rare circumstances. The last piece I want to mention here is that, you'll see it on this slide, Distinguished Teacher Review at the district level, is that principals can place teachers up to Proficient 1, but there's a separate district process to place teachers at Proficient 2 or higher, right? That has several, benefits and advantages. One of which it just allows us to make sure that we're holding a high standard for the higher levels of evaluation. In our profession and in new evaluation systems that have been implemented in other cities and states across the country in recent years, what they found is they put in this new evaluation system, but then at the end of the day, there was still this inflation creep. And so the design here is to have a district level process. So teachers who are eligible for the higher levels, Proficient 2 and higher, will get a team of 3 people, one of which will be a principal or an assistant principal. So we want to make sure there's an administrator part of that group. And then the other 2 will either be instructional coach or a academic facilitator or some other central office person who has instructional knowledge will be a part of this 3-person committee that then reviews that person's instruction as well as other dimensions of teacher leadership and components of being an effective teacher. And the idea with that is that teacher will also then more likely get someone who actually knows something more specialized about their content area as well. So that's an additional bonus. Teachers serving in Tier 1 schools, which we're going to define as in several different ways, but in general it's the highest need schools in the district, will actually get additional points in this process. And you might remember one of the goals, which I know he didn't read through very specifically, is that we find ways to create incentives for teachers to work in our highest need schools. And so this is one of those ways, is by creating having teachers get extra points who serve in these schools in the Distinguished Teacher Review process. So that was kind of a whirlwind tour of the evaluation system. Happy to answer more questions, for those who have questions, later. The second piece that I want to talk about, which, as Louisa mentioned and Jim mentioned too, I'm really excited about, is the supporting excellence piece. It's great to have an evaluation system that's more rigorous and all those things. But if we don't actually use that information to actually support teachers, well, might as well call it a day and go home. And so, because we found that we believe it's extremely critical that really define these supports and hold true to executing on these supports. So what we did to start this, and so I'll spend just a few minutes here because this is a new piece that wasn't presented last fall, is to highlight that we looked at the research. And so what does the research say is most effective in supporting teachers? And as you'll see on this slide, Linda Darling-Hammond, a professor at Stanford University, well respected in the field, did a comprehensive study of just looking at a status check in the profession, and came to these 4 components of we need to make sure it's connected to practice and be intensive and ongoing. So all these kind of one-shot workshops that not only districts do, but schools actually do, sometimes, of just, like, hey, here's a PD session on X topic, and then not returning to it is a bad practice, and I think we've all known that. They've sort of, resurfaced that. The second piece is it's got to focus on student learning and address the teaching of specific curriculum content. Third piece is it's got to be aligned to school improvement priorities and goals. It can't be something that's just disconnected, from where the direction of the school is going. And then the fourth is in the process, it has to focus on working relationships among teachers. And so it can't just be a workshop that's just presented and then, okay, good luck, presenting that content, we'll see it later. It has to foster stronger relationships in PLCs. So with that, those 4 guiding principles in mind, we designed 7 components that over the next 3 years, and I want to emphasize that because we have no, we understand it takes a lot, and so we have no false assumptions that we're going to be able to do all of this in one shot next year. The first 4 really address the 4 main professional learning contexts of teachers. So the first one is we know that there are those teachers out there that are like, you know what, just give me the resources, give me the tools, and I'm going to run with it. I'm going to be able to reflect on my teaching all by myself. Thank you very much. And so for those teachers, we want to create these short exemplar videos on each indicator of the framework so that they can see what effective teaching on that framework, on that rubric looks like, and really make it come alive. Secondly, we want to create that technology platform so that they can leverage a lot of resources and also reflect on their teaching. And then third, develop some training modules so that they're schooled in the most effective practices in using video cameras and the technology to help them get the most out of the technology and the videos. And so that's going to be useful for a lot of teachers, but we know when we think about the principles that Linda Darling outlined that it usually takes more than a teacher working in isolation to improve in their practice. An intensive support, of course, that is ideal for most teachers is one-on-one coaching. And so that's where we've been doing a lot of work with that this past year and a half of really trying to work with principals and helping them work in increasing their feedback to teachers and observing instruction. And we plan to continue to do more of that work in the coming year, develop more extensive calibration modules, and actually develop a resource bank for where principals can see videos of effective principals giving feedback to teachers. Started ad hoc in different feeder patterns where principals are videotaping themselves, giving feedback, and they're using them in feeder pattern meetings. But we want to create a more systemic process for doing that because we know that's varied across the district, right? To be perfectly honest, I mean, and we've heard that from you, depending on which teachers at which schools you speak to. Some teachers at certain schools will say, "I love the feedback I'm getting at my school. Things are working great." You see that in the climate surveys, and then there are other schools where it's like, "What are you talking about? The feedback that I'm getting is not where it needs to be," and so we need to level the playing field on that in that regard. Also, in one-on-one coaching, of course, is new teacher support. We get a lot of new teachers a year. I want to say it's
1,800?
1,800 new to the district, and the 900 are new to the profession, I think.
It
Or is it
depends on the
1,800?
year.
It depends on the year. Okay. It's a lot. so we have a lot of new teachers, and so we're working actually with HCM2 to collaboratively developing a new structured mentoring program for novice teachers. Third, as I mentioned, is we want to empower teacher teams. And so in schools right now, this varies across the campuses, and so there are supports for teacher teams, principals support teacher teams, but we want to create a more systemic district-wide support where we're training teacher team leaders to work more effectively with those teacher teams and creating resource that those teams can access. Lastly, in terms of the four main contexts, is we want to create better whole group PD. As if you saw the recent climate survey results, these again varied by school. Some teachers said the PD at my school is less than desirable. I was going to use a different word. It's less than desirable. And then there are others who are like, hey, this is great. I'm happy with what I'm getting. And so in talking with principals and teachers, what they said would be useful is create 1-hour PD modules that, with the facilitator guide on each indicator of the framework, as well as additional pieces that we can access, when we need it. So that's kind of one resource that we just need to build and develop. And then secondly, we just need to do a lot more work with principals and assistant principals and really developing the systemic plan for the year so that teachers see that it's comprehensive and it makes sense according to what the research shared from Linda Darling-Hammond. In addition to those four contexts, there's three broader initiatives that we're looking at that we're really excited about. One is developing summer learning labs. And you remember that Linda Darling-Hammond talked about having PD supports be intensive and ongoing. If the ideas in the summer learning lab is during the teaching of summer school, we can have progressing teachers paired with proficient and above teachers working during the summer in systemic ways, and so that they're constantly improving the practice of the progressing teachers. At the same time, the proficient and above teachers are learning skills in coaching and mentoring progressing teachers, which they need to be distinguished teachers. The second piece, we heard it from Linda Darling-Hammond, is we have to make sure that everything we do is embedded in content. And so we have some of these workshops already, but we want to build on these workshops and really make sure that we're hitting all the content areas, not just sort of reading and math. And the last piece, which really gets at the core of differentiating using the evaluation data, is developing these year-long academies that, again, start with the summer, partnering with the universities for teachers at different tiers. So we have our Progressing 2 teachers that we want to support in becoming Proficient 1 teachers, Proficient 1 teachers to become Distinguished teachers, and then Distinguished teachers to continue to grow. And the idea is that through these workshops and through, and we're still designing it, but it may be, monthly institutes during the rest of the year, that these teachers are engaged in professional learning communities across schools in the district, with university partners and other partners to support that professional learning. I kind of flew through that too. At least it felt to me. Much more detail we can talk there if there's questions there. And with that, gosh, I really flew through where we on the agenda, but I want to allow more time for the rewarding excellence pieces. But maybe I'll pause there just to see, are there any initial
In general,
questions? Yeah.
without, we don't have to get into dollars, but in terms of this additional professional development, is it supplementing what we already have, or are we going to, or everything's over and above what we already have?
Right now, and it may be in a slide later, but don't quote me on it. Right now, what we're looking at is about $3 million additional
Yeah,
investment.
we've got the dollars coming later, but
Okay.
so what
So for the
Vincente
supporting
does,
excellence,
Go
okay.
ahead. What Vincente does continues.
What he's currently doing, yes. And then on top of that, we're looking at an additional $3 million investment to supplement what it's, and it's not just what he's doing, it's also what in school leadership, all the academic facilitators supporting the instructional coaches are doing as well. And then also the support that happens from HCM. And so, I mean, just to give you some context, so last week I met with the supporting excellence group that was a cross-functional team from the district on fleshing out this plan, and we're actually meeting every week to continue this plan. But we met initially last week, and that was lots of people from across the district. And so this is the initial amount that's going to be in the 2014-15 budget that we're expecting. That's over and above what we're
But
spending now.
if a teacher has X amount of time that they can devote to professional development, then if they're doing more with this initiative, then the demand for the other is going to go down. So possibly the costs go down. Or will teachers be spending more time on professional development because they'll be doing a little bit of both?
And I think that's a great question. My response to it right now is that I think the challenge that we had, is that we haven't really segmented our teacher population well enough. Where I think there's some teachers who are very, they're tapped out, and in some ways they feel like they're getting effective supports with a combination of what they're getting on the campus and the teaching and learning supports. And I think that's my guess would be a very small number of teachers. I think there's another group of teachers where they're getting supports and they're trying to attend, what they can, but it's not what they want. And so I think, and now it's about improving the supports that they've been getting, through these other supports. And then there's a large group that I think that we're just not serving effectively, and that we need to, and that these additional supports are going to be helpful in that regard. And that's kind of how I would segment it. And so I think it's, so even for Vince Reyes and his team, some of it will be, I think, redirecting some of their resources already, in terms of the way, I know they already do some videotaping of teachers, for instance, and it's about are we videotaping teachers in the most effective and efficient ways currently, and can we redirect some of that time, especially in how that's spent. Yeah.
I'm curious about development of all this. I read everything that was online today on the website, which is really great, by the way. And I was curious about the evaluation piece, and I'm glad to see all that different stuff that's still in draft. Hope you'll put that on there when you get it more perfected. But so as far as developing this all, is this something that has been paid for by redirecting administrative resources that were used on something else? Is this what's been the initiative cost for this to be developed? Like looking at the MET surveys, all that stuff. Where did this come from?
Where did this come from?
Well,
Or do
you want me to jump in on this for
Feel
part
free.
of it? Some of it was money that was already allocated, like DMC, who we've worked closely with for the past 3 years. This is year 3 of 3. There was a contract with DMC to execute the work in terms of some of the research and some of the information that you see bubbling up now. There is additional resource that has been allocated, but a lot of it has been repurposed. So people were doing X over here, they're now doing Y as part of TEI. I think Milan can speak to that personally. So what you'll see throughout the effort as we look towards implementation, there are some additional funds, but there has been a lot of repurposing of personnel and resource that already existed.
So you
Correct me. Wasn't the original number to sort of develop the project about $2 million? Is that the contract?
The DMC contract, it was something in that ballpark, and it was reduced.
So it's a considerable amount of funds that have already been spent.
Right,
putting
yeah,
this
okay.
together.
For the evaluation piece.
Lucy?
Okay, you said that you were going to have various levels of teachers to do sort of like training for others. Do you have additional funds for that? Will they be would these teachers be compensated for helping other teachers?
For the Distinguished Teacher Review?
Well, your professional, let's see here, you had said proficient 1 teachers in order to support them in becoming distinguished teachers. Okay, proficient 1 teachers, will they be compensated to help other teachers to become distinguished teachers? Or this is a volunteer thing? Or are you just going to base it on their extra money that they're making that year?
You know, for the and I think we're still working through this, but so the model that we're moving to is one in which with the increase in salaries, that we're one of the goals of TEI is to create a professional culture in which with the higher salary comes additional responsibilities. And so no, I want to be transparent in saying that that in terms of stipends, and so we're looking at what that's, how that might be. I mean, we're looking at phasing out stipends for certain categories, and so bilingual stipends and things like that, hard to recruit areas, we don't see those going away anytime soon. But other types of stipends we're taking a closer look at for phase out.
Because I was looking at, you were saying something about the learning labs, okay, and in the summertime, and you're going to use teachers in those learning labs. So how will they be compensated? Again, at their level of proficiency, they get that within their salary increase? Do they know that?
And that's where I don't think we've fully fleshed this out, because we've talked about during the year kinds of stipends and that phasing out. During the summer, and I can speak to the differentiated PD academies, we've actually talked about those being stipended. And for the summer school, that's one of the things we're, literally like working through as...
So this could be
right now.
additional...
Additional compensation.
Yeah, okay. Oh, well,
Yeah.
okay.
It might answer a lot of
Yeah,
questions.
go ahead.
Well,
I was going to say, it might help to go ahead and jump to page 18 here. It's page 18 on here, so I'm not sure which it is on your slide, but it's the non-teacher salary budget implications, and talk about what you've already contemplated. You see the one I'm talking about?
Do you want to skip the rewarding?
No, but I
section?
think these dollars really relate to what we were just talking about, so I thought we'd kind of tie them together. It's on page 18 of your handout.
It's the non-teacher salary budget implication slides. It's 35. Slide 35, which jumps to you, Christina.
What we have here is the 3-year cost associated with starting up the program. There's some IT costs, several assessment costs, some student surveys. These are both mixed in with additional staff members going out and getting RFPs, as Milan mentioned. The last line of it, the professional development, $3 million we have here, is kind of, I imagine, comprehensive of the entire program, whether it be developing the materials, getting outside resources to help us. All of that rolled into the $3 million.
These look really ballpark. Is that a good assumption, or is it what we could?
We do have on our TEI implementation team, we have MIS representatives from the IT department, and they would have provided input on the system setups. As far as the assessment development and
I can speak to. The conversations that we had when we were developing these budget numbers. We did estimate, and there's a little bit more detail in the concept paper around the number of FTEs that we're
We have the
looking.
concept paper in the front.
page 39 does have some details
Oh, there we go.
about each of these. Probably not to the level that you're looking for.
Well, I mean, that helps that there's staff associated with them, that's, okay. There's some factors
And,
in there.
Yeah, they're not completely made up numbers, just to be clear. but they are, and they'll be refined, I think, as we go through the process. But we did an initial estimate, thinking through, okay, what are given the needs of the system, how many people and what kinds of roles will we need, for each of these functions. So as we thought through, so Cecilia Oakley and her team, really thought about, okay, what do we need for the assessment, development, scoring, and data analysis, based on current capacity, and different needs like that. Same for student surveys as an estimate, of course. I mean, we'll have to do an RFP and to see what that looks like. And then the TEI implementation team and distinguished teacher reviews. I mean, we kind of sat down and actually that analysis, I mean, we really calculated out how much time is this going to take for each distinguished teacher review. How many hours is that going to take over what period of time, and what does the staffing for that look like? Have we written up, we haven't written up specific job descriptions for each of those roles or anything like that.
These are the non-salary items, and then the footnote says, I interpret it, you're saying this is an investment of $800 per teacher.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that note.
It's not compensation, but we're investing roughly $800 per teacher per year to grow them around this program.
It's not all non-salary, it's non-teacher salary, so there will be some salaries
Correct.
in there, but just
Correct.
not for teachers.
Right. And that figure was just taken by taking the roughly $8 million divided by roughly 10,000.
Generally, to answer Lucy's question, the new things, not necessarily extra, because there might be trade-offs, but the new things that teachers will be doing will be part of their salary structure. There won't be a stipend for summer training or Saturdays, or we don't know.
I guess, and Carmen, correct me on this. In summer, we still need. I think that we need to look at separately, because I think that is different time, additional time. But during the school year, in terms of additional professional responsibilities, like if there's an opportunity to be a member of the instructional leadership team or things like that, that would be the sort of thing that's not compensated. Because if you want to be a distinguished teacher, actually one of the things on the distinguished teacher rubric is that you're assessed on your teacher leadership. And so it's, and then of course the salary increase, is quite substantial compared to the normal salary increase. So it sort of accounts for the increase in additional responsibilities.
And there's an opt-in component. So when it comes to the Distinguished Teacher Review, if I were to go to Jim and say, Jim, you're up for Distinguished Teacher Review, your scores meet the threshold, etc., and Jim says, well, Carmen, I'm not interested in all this other hoorah that you're talking about. I don't want to be part of that process. I'll take the higher rating, but I would rather stay as part of this other category. He has that right as well.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
The rubric's really clear and consistent, I thought, with both the expectations and then how you're looked at, because it really lays out that's part of what you think of when you think of a master teacher.
I guess going back to Lucy's question, whenever you were putting together this information, collecting the data, the teachers you were asking for input, were they aware that they would have the option to opt out, or of the continuing education or the leadership program?
Yeah, so there's not, the employee manual side of this does not yet exist. It's still being written. But essentially, that will have to be further communicated, that if you do not want to be a distinguished teacher, you do not have to be. You could stay as just the general, proficient one. And you could say, I'm going to write out proficient one. But any strong principal is going to say, hey, Ben, come on. You know what I mean? You have so much to contribute to your colleagues, to this campus, etc. And I would say, Milan, you can chime in here, but if you're one of the best teachers on my campus and you have things that skills that would allow other people to grow, I'm either going to push you to promote to be an AP, academic facilitator, instructional coach, or for you to be a teacher leader on the campus. If not, then I don't think I'm fully doing my job if I'm not willing to grow you as a professional.
Okay. Well, okay. Because when I look at the performance side, and of course they mentioned at the last meeting we had that many of the teachers are opting to take staff development at this particular time. And I figured, well, why not? Because that's part of the rubrics, and it has always been, even in the PDOS, how many professional training hours did you do, and et cetera. But so if this person becomes a proficient 2 teacher and still attend professional meetings and trainings and not be a leader, but still continue to take those training courses wherever they're going, can they still remain that proficient 2 teacher without becoming a leader in the school? Because, see, that's part of your,
For the rubric.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that we're looking at is how we define teacher leadership. And,
Maybe we have, yeah.
and so I think there's a broad definition, because part of teacher leadership is also leading, it could be leading in your subject area. So, for instance, if I'm, the music teacher, and I'm the only music teacher, in a school, which isn't too uncommon, one of the ways that you could be demonstrating leadership is more broadly, whether it's in the district, in the state, in the country, in that way, and that could be a demonstration
I guess you
of
just
leadership.
have to refine it.
Right,
Definition.
right,
Okay.
absolutely.
Before we move on to Carmen's piece, who else is doing this? Are we, when you say you've looked at national research, no one else has done this broadly, right? Other school systems?
So a lot of districts all over the country are changing their evaluation systems. I mean, that's been spurred on not only by the Met study, but then also the Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan. I mean, they've built up a lot of incentives for states to reform their evaluation systems. So that piece that's happening almost everywhere. The compensation piece is not happening everywhere. And a system like this also in a large district is not happening anywhere that I know of.
I would add, just talking to my HR colleagues around the state, I've gotten a lot of emails and nationally that say, Carmen, where are you guys on this? When is this going to launch? What are your pain points? And let us know what they are before we take next steps. So in a lot of ways, people are waiting on it, especially with a compensation component, so that they don't misstep, essentially. So they're sitting back and saying, we can do the teacher eval part, but I was even talking to the chief of HR, the equivalent from Irving, a few weeks ago, just about if they want to move in this direction, what would this look like?
And overall, have we had any grants or, and you mentioned university partnerships, and so they're contributing financially in some way to some of this? What external funding?
Actually, in terms of grants, we actually have, literally the application went last week, as you know as well. And so TEA put out a grant proposal, a request, and so we've requested up to $1 million over the next 4 years to help fund
I think that's the one
this
that I
system.
mentioned earlier on, that they did have the funds.
Yeah,
Okay, the
and-
TEA grant.
exactly. And so there's a short timeline on this, and so we learned about the grant and put together our best application. So we're hopeful we'll hear back in mid-March. I think that was the timeline, and the grant's actually effective April 1st. And so if we get the grant, we'll actually be able to use it right away. But the TEA has actually been extremely supportive. They're also, we're in dialogue with them. They're excited about what we're doing. They're looking forward to having us implement
Well, that does present a question I hadn't thought about. What is their role in this, if anything? Do they have to approve what we're doing? How does that work?
So the board of trustees ultimately has to approve. If the board of trustees approves, TEA is already aligned. So it's really up to our board.
And then the TA does have to approve formally, but
Right, but I mean, in terms of how basically policy law is written, it's determined by your board, not by TEA.
we get a waiver.
This was like in the, I think, sent out on the draft on page 19. There was a question about an art teacher, measurement of an elementary art teacher include the student's performance on the spring art project. Who will determine those projects and how will they be measured? You know, is it going to be a district, so you have to do watercolors, or you have to do steel art, or you have to do
Excuse me.
what?
Performance-based questions, can we hold those?
Okay.
Let's stick to the dollar questions, because there have been all these, if you could take those to the
Okay.
forum that's developing that part of
Okay,
it.
so excuse me, I was misunderstanding. I thought we could ask a question.
No,
That's all right.
dollar related, if that's okay.
Okay, I thought you said not to ask Dollar until a few minutes.
Oh,
Okay. You said go ahead.
at the beginning, we said, let's not get into the fine tuning of how they're going to be evaluated, but the related dollars in the whole program. So, but go ahead if you've got.
That's all
some
right.
of-
That's all right. We get it.
I mean, the short answer, if that's okay, I mean, to the question is that I don't know the details, and so it's a fair response. But I do believe that the teaching and learning office is designing that assessment with input from teachers. Does it make sense to maybe to have Carmen go ahead and
Yeah.
go through the rewarding excellence section?
Sounds
Does that make sense?
Yes. Not a lot of new information here. This slide essentially says that if you're better, you should get paid more. And if you're the best, you should get paid the most. And so that's really what the whole model is about, and that's what the Texas Teaching Commission and the New Teacher Project are articulating here as well. On this next slide, essentially, let me flip back. So it's really that, you know, it's based on results, and you're rewarding effective teachers, and you can earn more money over a shorter period of time. So as you guys know, in the current salary schedule, which I'll show you in a couple slides, you're on a step, you have so many years of experience, that determines your salary. And in terms of sustainability, Christina will speak to that in a few slides, but it's essentially saying we're going to use the same amount of salary that we did before of our budget, and we are going to reallocate who gets paid what. So on this slide, which Milan showed earlier, it essentially walks you through what the proposed dollar amounts are going to be at a given level. Novice is coming in at $47K. And where it says experienced teachers new to the district can be placed at progressing 1 or 2 and proficient 1, the biggest challenge here, to be fully transparent, is it will truly bottleneck hiring if it's a one-off scenario for every single person coming in, especially because you can't just base it on someone's data. Because what if you came from California and somebody else came from a Texas school? You're not going to have the same data, so it's not apples to apples. My compensation team is proposing that essentially there's some correlation for your first year in terms of years of experience where you would fall on this scale and what the dollar amount would be, and then using your data from your first year in the district to determine where you'd be placed on the scale going forward. Especially because if someone brings their data from outside, how do you validate it? If they're from Ohio, where I'm from, and they say, this is what I've gotten. Okay, you know what I mean? That sort of thing. So we're still working through the placement, because essentially, too, the original thought was a hiring manager could suggest where the experienced teachers would be placed on the scale 1, 2, or proficient 1. But everyone in compensation always goes for the high end, right? When you're trying to recruit someone. And so we want to prevent inflation in terms of at what price point people come in. The novice $47K is for new to teaching teachers who are coming into the district.
Can I just ask one question? How do they come in now? Is it just years?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, years of creditable service. hmm and so on this slide, it's comparing teachers with a master's degree. That's on the left. So if you just have a bachelor's degree, it's even lower starting amount than the 4722. Compared to in this new model, let's say you don't even advance a level every year. You know, this person here is at Progressing 1 for a year. They sit at Progressing 2. They sit at Proficient 1 for 4 years, I believe. Essentially, even if it's a slow progression in honing their craft and moving up the scale, if you look at a 15-year period, they would still make $83,260 more in the new model than they would in the old model. In this current model, you could be great or you could be terrible, but if you're here every year, you're going to get a certain increase, essentially. And that's what it's outlining on the left. Do you want me to continue, or you want to ask?
In some cases, I don't know what to ask. Okay, you're just talking about the scale on the left and not the other one.
Actually,
Right,
I'm
just the steps that they can go through. Is that what you're saying?
This
Okay.
is, I misread this, that this was some kind of model, but it's an individual, it's a what if. This is an individual.
Yeah, that's what.
Okay, you
and
got
these
that.
are basically the regular steps that they can get
Just for the left side.
just for being here on the left side. Okay,
got
that's
it.
what I. Okay,
You got it. And the point that this is driving also is that that's with the master's degree. So you imagine with the bachelor's degree, they're making even less money
Start out
currently.
like 46.
Correct.
Okay, and you're not talking about the scale on the schedule on the left. I mean on the right now. Are
The
you?
right would be... No, you can mention it. Yeah.
Okay, well, progressing 1, 49, and then the next year you still can you remain at progressing 1 for a long time?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't necessarily have to move up.
You don't, but I mean, the non-renewal...
I think that
The non-renewal process still exists, right? So if you are at Progressing 1 for 10 years, and I've sent you to every professional development under the sun, as an HCM person, you're probably going through a different process at this point than continuing to sit at Progressing 1.
this one.
Correct.
Okay, and even if you change principles, you know, sometimes that could come
Impact your
into play.
rating?
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. I think okay.
So if you change principals, it depends at what point in the year. Let's say you go through the open transfer window, and like this year, the open transfer window will take place in April. You would be at your new campus for the 14-15 school year. Then they would assess you there. So it could cause you to move, or you could stay the same.
That's what I'm thinking.
So
But
the
if-
youth, go on.
I was just going to say, if you're an ineffective teacher, there's still going to be documentation that follows you, even if you switch campuses.
And you have a different review team anyway.
Correct.
Okay.
So the years of experience is going out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how's that going to equate when you retire? You know, because they look at the years of experience. When you retire, how many years you had, that's how, you know, your money is averaged.
Right. So it would be based on your salary.
Still your highest
And
salary.
you still get
High
years.
salary within 3 years.
There's a formula
High
TRS.
salary within 3
that
years.
has nothing to do with DISD. Once you retire,
I'm retired, that's what I'm saying,
Right, so
because
that's
they
not
went on my
gonna-
years of experience.
They still
Okay.
know how many years you're paying
Highest
in.
in 3 years, yeah. Your highest salary. The average of your salary in 3 years.
I'm
yeah.
just saying because the way this is structured now, it's not years of experience. So,
It's still 14.
I know it's according to your salary, they average the highest salaries, but they still ask you that question on there, how many years of experience do you have? They don't ask you this.
Well, years are embedded here, and the reason why I say that is you can only move up a level each year. So I couldn't be a first-year teacher at Proficient 3.
I'm just saying, you know, when you do retirement work, they ask you how many years of experience do you have. They don't ask you to average your own salary.
Right.
I understand that. What I'm saying is, what would someone put?
so
They'd still put 14 if they retired at year 14.
Okay, so as I'm saying, over here we're still using this other side though.
This is just this is today you've
I
been
understand
there
that. I'm
for
just asking a question.
Hopefully
I
they
need to
wouldn't lose
understand.
track of
Okay.
The answer to
how
the
many years
question
they were teaching.
is
we still capture it in
yes,
HCM.
the years are being used for retirement purposes, right? And that's what TRS will sort of ask those questions for. But the years won't factor into your salary. That makes sense. And so it still factors in for retirement.
So if,
So no change on that front.
but if you're an excellent teacher, this can work in your favor.
I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about
But
each
I'm
the
just saying,
equation.
in
What
terms
you have
of your
to- paperwork
retirement,
you have to fill out.
your retirement benefits,
Yeah.
your retirement is based upon your salary at the end of your career. I don't know the exact number of years, plus your years of service. And so, if you're making more in this system than you otherwise might, then your retirement more. If you're not effective, of course, it goes the other way.
I understand all of that because I'm going on the experience that I've had and other people have who retired because sometimes they would not have your years of experience correct downtown. And then you had to fix it. They had to fix it. So, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be ignorant.
we still
I'm
have
just
to
trying
keep
to
that
explain
because-
people this experience that
if
has
you
happened.
if you
They
take off
have
a
they
couple
have gone on, and you know they have had people have had their years messed up, and you got to fill out paperwork about years of experience, not this.
Correct, but
So I was
to
just-
Debbie's point, in terms of how creditable years of service are calculated from an HCM perspective, if you don't turn in your service records from every single district, it will not be correct in our office. And if you taught in a private school or overseas, those may not count. So there could be discrepancies along the way, definitely, that will have to be streamlined.
The things that you have to track for TRS, you still have to track for TRS.
Next slide,
Next
I
slide.
think. Yeah. So here's some of kind of the additional rules that go with the program. And to Trustee Morath's point, he was just saying due to the number of rules incorporated in this program to make it most fair, these will be outlined separately once we go to manuals for our employees. But based on the 14-15 ratings, all classroom teachers would be assigned an overall effectiveness level. The implementation of new salary won't happen until 15-16. So no one's salary is impacted next year. We're on the same model. If this passes in May, we're on the same model. People are getting paid the same. That year of data will determine 15-16 payout. Teacher salaries will not go below the 14-15 level. This is a big deal because this is where you do have financial investment. Essentially, let's say on this scale, will you go back 2 slides, please? Let's say on this scale, in that first year, so in 14-15, your data outlines that you are going to be 54, right? A proficient 1 teacher. If that's where you are, but your salary is currently $67,000 because of where you are in the district, how many years, you still get the 67. You are not dropping below your 14-15 salary. So that's a really big deal.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a very big deal. So what you will
I'll be
have...
considered that proficient 3 teacher.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Which will give you other benefits.
Right. So your overall effectiveness level is at proficient 1, but your salary could be at 60-something.
Even if you pass that and 2 years down the road you fall back down, will never make.
Yeah, that's always your floor.
But would there be the expectation that if you're making 67, but you're at a proficient 1, that there's going to be an effort to either say you need to improve
Somebody
or you
writing
need to
you
not be
back.
renewed?
It will be encouraged that there's professional development and that you're growing. But to Milan's point, the range of professional development that teachers have received varies. So
No, I'm not.
yeah.
I'm just asking that's kind of that's how the system is meant to work. Is that correct? I mean, I'm accurate in understanding.
I think
that?
over time, but initially, if no one has ever given you meaningful feedback, you're not going to go through the non-renewal process after 1 year due to this gap. I think as a system, the goal is that over time, yes, compensation will match effectiveness, but we know it's going to take several years to get there because first off, everyone is proficient or, exceeds expectations now, 98% of people. So it's going to be a shock to the system to have a rating that's lower on the scale. And shifting the dollars to match that will take time. But 14, 15 floor, those are for people who are in the district currently. If you come to the district in 15, 16, that's your first year, you have no floor. Yeah, go back forward, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Right.
So the maximum salary increase in a single year is going to be capped at $5,000 for an individual teacher for the first 2 years, which is with that third bullet point. It's really to make the model sustainable and cap how quickly people are moving up the scale. And Proficient 1 teachers have to have a minimum of 3 years of teaching experience. And so if you look at where novice comes in and how people move, that's just another caveat.
So, but compare that to the slide, 2 slides back. How does that come into play?
So essentially, if you come in as a novice teacher, right, you're going to be placed on the scale after your first year.
Right.
You can only move up a level per year.
Right.
So in order to get to Proficient 1, it makes sense that you have 3 years of teaching experience. Does that make sense, Jim?
Sure. So, but where's the $5,000 cap come into play?
Like between
Oh, sure.
Proficient 2 and 3?
So,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Sure.
So essentially, let's say you're a novice teacher. You come in your first year. You're a new to teaching teacher, right? You're at 47K. You then would not be able to jump to Proficient 1, which would with a full increase. So that increase would be 7K. You're not going to get 7. It's going to be capped at 5.
I thought you could only jump one level anyways.
But after you're, correct me if I'm wrong, after you're a novice, you're going to be placed on the scale.
Well, actually, after novice, you go to progressing 1.
Just automatically.
Actually, automatically. And
But if you're a teacher already and you get ranked at Proficient 2, and then
Yeah.
the next year you test, you do everything, and you would be Proficient 3, you're not going to get that $6,000. You're only going to get 5
Right.
for the first 2 years.
Right.
Right.
And that's a good way to think about it. Just think of any teacher who's, I mean, on the current salary schedule, if they're making 50,000 currently, but then they're rated proficient, they go through the distinguished teacher review process, and they're rated Proficient 2. Instead of the 59 for the first year, they'll get 55. And so, and likewise, if they're rated Exemplary 1, if they're making 50,000 now, I mean, let's say, they're making 50,000 now, they're not going to make 74.
I can think of one in particular who's got all these awards, all these recognitions. You look her up on the Texas database and she's in the middle of the pack. But in my mind, she should be Exemplary 1. And you're saying she'll only go up 5.
For the first 2
For
years.
the first 2 years. And
She could go up 5 in year 1 and 5 in year 2, so she could get $10,000 raise in 2 years,
right, which is so
which is really different.
our,
Right.
And again, there's mixed feelings, right, about this. Obviously, for the teacher who could potentially make a $25,000 raise in 1 year, they're not going to get that full raise, right? According to this.
It's probably the better example to go to that end instead of.
You'll
trying
see it
to
in the
figure out
model
where to get
when we
it.
get to that part to explaining
Yes.
it. It kind of.
Have you taken any campus and asked and given some ratings to a teacher population to see how this will spit out, so to speak?
Reality-based modeling.
Thank you.
And that's what Brian's going to talk about in just a little bit, and that's where there was sort of a projection that was made, looking at what that's going to look like, and that's why based on these projections we feel like for the first 2 years we feel like we need that cap of $5,000 in order for this to be sustainable. Because keeping in mind that we have that salary floor, right, that we're using keep maintaining the 2014-15 salaries, which will go away, right, over time. But we know that in order to have this be sustainable, that's part of the reason for the cap. And of course, there are those teachers who are going to say, that, wow, $5,000, cap is, how is that fair? But we have to keep in mind that right now the average raise is either 0 if you're not really gaining, or the average when I looked at it, like $600 or $700, and there's a couple times where it goes up by more than that. But the average raise right now is
2%.
Is
Yeah, so are you saying that basically there you may not get a, like we did this year, 2% raise for all teachers?
No.
Will those percentages just be eliminated from now on and just go by this chart? Would you have actual raises anymore?
So flip forward a slide.
Yeah, let's flip
because
forward. Okay.
That's yes, right there. So that's the second major bullet point: the adjustment for inflation or cost of living. So even in a model like this, yeah, the COLA aspect of this, even in a model such as this, every 3 years, you still are going to have to look at the market and say, are these numbers still competitive? Okay. Novice for 47 for novice might seem great now, but in 3 years, we could determine that needs to be 49, or that should be 40, whatever the case may be.
So
Clearly it's
this
gonna go-
will change according to the,
oh yeah.
You got it. It would be adjusted
Scale
across
will
the
be
board.
adjusted.
Yes, the entire scale.
Every couple years or every year?
based
Every
on
3 years.
every 3 years.
There's zero potential for
have
a
the
raise
money.
just because you came back to work next year.
You got it. You got it. No guarantee there.
Go ahead.
Do you want to go?
Yeah, this comes up, I call it Dan Mitchgay's issue, and I understand it, but that we continue to be low compared to our peers at the novice level, which makes it hard to compete with getting the top teachers coming out of into the profession. And so we're not going to address that.
So it has been addressed. So we did a market analysis to determine what novice should be. So if you look at where our starting teacher salary is now at the 46 and change, shifting that up to 47, and this is before we consider an increase for next year if the board were to approve a 2 or 3% raise. Like, this is going to have to be revisited, essentially. But what we looked at for current numbers, if this is the starting salary for someone with a master's degree versus the novice or proficient one, where people are coming in. So here on the scale now, you could say if you're coming in from another district, you could start all the way up to 54K, which would put us at or above market for most of the districts in the area.
Right.
This is still before what is being potentially proposed to the board for an increase for next year, if there's another cost of living increase, depending on benefits and all of those things.
Remember the recruitment incentives we have also for the areas that we do
Right.
staffing
And
assistance.
stipends that currently still exist. So, to Milan's point, stipends are going to continue as of now for hard to fill areas. So that's on top of this amount. So if you were to take in this new salary schedule, you're a novice teacher, and you were to take the recruitment incentive that just got approved in addition to the bilingual stipend, you're looking at $7,000 on top of this, which would put you at 54, which would put you above market.
But it's 1 year. It's an incentive, not a stipend.
There's a stipend and an incentive.
Right. Got it. Okay.
And as of now, the stipends for department chairs, team leaders, and mentors will continue. 2014, or 2015, 16, we'll look at it again and say which of these should be phased out.
And those are especially in the Imagine 2020 schools. That's where those stipends are, right?
All right.
Those will allow us to focus if there are certain areas that we need assistance in recruiting the top candidates. We don't have to adjust the entire scale for every teacher, but only the targeted ones that we need. So we're a little more responsive in that area than adjusting the entire scale.
I wanted to introduce Brian again. He was out in the bathroom when I mentioned his name, but he's the one who did the analysis, huge spreadsheet, lots of numbers. He's more in tune with how the dollars work, so he's going to be doing the presentation. And then if we can't answer any question, I'll be taking notes, and then we'll get an answer back to you guys.
If you could take one and pass it down. You have this in your document, but it's black and white, so there's some colors on there that might help you look at it. I'll start. We have two concepts here to ensure the sustainability of the model. If you look at the first sheet that on the packet that I passed out, you'll see we kind of have a summary of what our budget is going to look like for the next 4 fiscal years, I believe. I think I passed them all out. I didn't keep one for myself.
Hold up 1 minute until we get these around the top.
Okay. When it gets back to me, I'll send it back to you.
An extra one. Can you pass it down? Okay, so you'll see the current fiscal year we're in. We say the 2013-14 budget that our total salaries, both general operating and all the grant funds that we have, Title I, special ed, we're looking at about $550 million for salary and another $65 million for benefits. That consumes about 47.5% of our entire maintenance and operation budget. So if we carry that forward for the next 4 fiscal years, and we assume we would be giving a step increase generally anywhere from 2 to 3%, depending on what step you may be on at any time. We'll say from 2013 to 2014-15, that step increase would cost us about $9.1 million. Assuming no other increase in revenue, you can see the percentage of the M&O budget slightly creeps up. You follow that trend all the way through the next 4 fiscal years. We're saying here our revenues are going to stay the same, but if we were to increase the teacher salary base with a step increase each year, our general salary budget would continue to climb. You can see by 2017-18 we would forecast it to be about $584 million. So we kind of took that as a premise to modeling out the costs associated with this. If we were to keep our budget exactly the same, of course, the performance model, the cost would be a little higher, but we're going to be saying that we're going to be increasing our salary budget. We would be doing a step increase each year. So the next sheet in the packet is kind of the detailed model for the startup year. You'll see there's 2 colors here. I'll just start by addressing the colors. The blue will say these are all employees subject to the ceiling, the $5,000 raise. So of course, if you look at in the Proficient 1 column, I say we have 930 employees. They're going to be rated Proficient 1. If you look all the way to the far left, they're in the less than $47,000 category. So right now they're making, let's say $47,000. We're going to $46,000. We're going to place them at Proficient 1. They would only be able to receive a $5,000 raise, so that means their salary would be stuck at $51 for the first year. So although those 930 people were rated Proficient 1 with a salary of $54,000, we're only going to be paying them $51,000. So their shaded blue is saying that there's going to be a savings, I guess you could say, associated with only giving them the $5,000 raise. It's a savings of about $2.7 million. It's just a simple, what would that be? $3,000 times 930 is where we get the $2,790,000 from. Looking at the other side of that, you'll see there are 70 people. It's the first pink column. 70 people that should be receiving $45,000, but their current salary is $46,000. So those employees are going to cost us $70,000 above what they would have been earning because they're getting $1,000 more than their the salary that corresponds with their rating. So we kind of followed the white people, the white people, the non-shaded groups of employees. Those
Maybe drop yellow in there.
yellow. The yellow ones, those are not subject to the ceiling or the floor. They are on target with where they should be. They were making $46,000 in 14-15 going into 15-16. We say they should make $49,000, $51,000. They're able to receive the full jump up to the salary that they're placed at. We follow that trends all the way through each of the performance rating groups. I'm applying the forced distribution percentage from all the ratings you see on the top left here across each of the current salary distributions, and we get a total cost of $567 million going into 2015-16 just for salaries. If you notice on the first sheet, you go back, what we said our current budget would be going into 15-16 with a step increase was about $567 million. So we're very much in line with where we would be 2 steps up from our current budget. It's more or less equal to the startup year. You'll see we're projecting about 2,860 employees that will be subject to the ceiling and about 3,100 people subject to the floor. So the floor cost the first year is going to cost us about $23 million, but we're offsetting a large portion of that with the savings from the ceiling, which is about $14.6 million. So even those numbers out, you're looking at about a $9 to $10 million increase, which we would say we would be paying because we would give a step increase to the current base. So there are some additional costs associated with implementing it over the previous year's salary schedule, but if you assume that we would be giving a step increase, we're kind of covering that cost in our forecasted budget.
It seems another really important assumption is the performance distribution. And so what's that based on?
That's maybe Alon can
The
speak
bell
to.
curve looks, so that's your assumption? Is there anybody that you can look at that would support why you're making that assumption? Like, what's Finland look like? Because they're supposed to have the best teachers.
And if you look at the slide that we have up, the second bullet here is that we're going to utilize a target distribution onto our teacher population. So these percentages up here in the top left, those are essentially slots available in each performance category. We will not exceed 12% of our entire teacher base, which we're forecasting at 10,527. There's only so many people that can be rated in each category.
Yeah, it's a model of relative performance. So where do you stack up in relation to your peers?
Is there any potential for an absolute performance criteria what if we did such a great job training teachers that almost everybody was proficient 3?
It would take a long time for us to get there.
Right, but is that? That's one of the things that I really wonder. That has huge budgetary implications.
Absolutely.
Money.
Well, I think it goes to the question of also when you look at the years of experience of our current teaching force, right? It tends to be on the younger side. So I think part of the creation of that targeted distribution has really looked at two things. One, what does our current teaching force look like, and anticipating some of the new teachers coming in on the front end, and then also, of course, looking at teachers leaving at retirement. But the second piece of that is just looking at what does the distribution of student achievement look like as well. And so, and I know the superintendent's not here to speak to it directly, but when I've asked him actually a version of your question as well early on in asking how does that look, and I think it is when you look at our distribution of student achievement isn't that 90% of our students are at proficient right on assessments, and so what should that distribution should the distribution of proficient teachers be the same as students? And well, maybe it doesn't have to be exactly the same. There's lots of variables there, but I think that curve partially is, I think, what informs this target distribution, along with the fact that we have a younger teaching force. I could see, and so the distribution that we have, and the target distribution that we're proposing. Sorry, let me just go to that slide.
3%, 12%, 25%,
Yeah.
40%.
This one over here, is what we're looking at. And so in this scenario, we're still saying, the majority of our teachers, 58%, would be proficient, 37% at the progressing levels. And that's partially a reflection of just our teaching force. You heard Carmen talk earlier about how you need to have at least 3 years, right, to be a proficient 1 teacher. And so that's partially attributable to just the years of experience that we have. In terms, going to your question of, do we have the budget, right, if we wanted to increase that? And the initial answer is, well, no, right? We don't. But I think that's a similar problem that other districts, just in my experience, when you look, nationally, districts that have a more experienced workforce, that sort of happens over time, and then they make room in the budget for it, right? And I think what Carmen is saying too is that as we have to build in these rules in the system to ensure sustainability and predictability, right? The predictability is what's ensuring, the sustainability kind of in this system. And so would it be that as we have excellent professional development, more effective coaching, that this curve would shift? Absolutely. That we would then have to revisit and say, okay, let's make sure that we're building a targeted distribution that's really more aligned with what we're seeing in terms of the movements with student achievement. That won't happen overnight, but that is something that we will want to move. And as I've said, I'll say, that the teacher presentations that I've done, I'm like, if it comes to be that we need to increase the budget, I think first you should fire the assistant superintendents. You can fire me, and I say that seriously in the sense that there's nothing more important than the teachers on the campus, and then of course the principal. And so if we need to, and central office staff don't appreciate this when I say it, but if we need to then cut central office staff so we can fund our most proficient teachers, let's do that.
But I think
and let's figure out the way.
We're missing a
Secondly-
critical piece, though. I mean, seriously, we're missing
Yeah,
a critical piece. When your performance increases, the money comes in. Like, as someone who came from Houston, like, all the money that became available as scores shifted positively freed up a lot of funds to do Apollo 20. They won the Bro Prize. They got more money for that. They got money from College Board. So also, if you are a more effective district, you increase your student population, which increases revenue. You're going to get more grants. You're going to have more opportunities. So you can still get to a point, to your point, where you still have to look at what percentage of the budget are you using for this purpose. But when you aren't a high-performing district, you can't even get access to the funds to compensate further in a model like this.
It's
Let me ask you about the
I agree with
TEA.
Carmen about doing that first before you fire me.
all these other options before we before they fire.
Just interject. The common misperception is that we can pay for things by cutting central staff, and you can only buy so much.
Sure. No, that's true too.
But are you going to use any of the TEA money as a pilot for, that money you're getting for the excellence?
If it's
Teaching.
approved.
Well, if you were to get it, would you be able to use that for maybe part of the first year to pay for some of the salaries, the teachers' salaries? Because I don't know. You said it was just
How
1
would-
million.
how would you-
Just 1 million of
If
it?
you get
grant.
the million from TEA, how will you use it?
And I mean, I don't have the details of
because
of
you
how
just
we
wrote- okay.
what we
All right.
proposed, but I can say one thing. We did not propose using any of that money to fund teacher salaries
Okay.
because the way the TEA
Increases, none of the increases.
no, the way the TEA grant is worded, of course, it shouldn't. What's the word? It has to supplement whatever
Supplement,
we're
right, it can
the
supplant.
base plan, and
Okay.
so we didn't want it to be about teacher salaries, and so a lot of it was built around the extra
Standards.
supports. And
The
things
other
like that.
thing you had mentioned about the performances and how that would have a tendency to be part of the rating. What about, you don't have on here the CEIs? Because longitudinally, a teacher could raise that whole class, a whole grade level, and perhaps not have a high performance on the state scores. So what would you do there? I mean, because you can see that the students have improved, but they still are not where they need to be. But the teacher has actually made improvement.
And you're saying
I
that,
didn't see the CEI listed as one of the indicators.
and that's where, and again, sorry, the details, we left that detail out of the PowerPoint. It's in the concept paper, but remember that when I talked about there's one of 3 measures that will be used in the achievement template. The CEI is one of those 3.
You get to pick which one. Or you get
Actually, you get the
Just
highest.
take the highest.
Yeah,
One
we
that
just take
the
the
teacher
highest
takes
one.
the highest. I mean, the
And that's exactly how the principal evaluation worked this past year. Instead of CEI, we used SEI, for that, and it was just the highest of the 3.
yeah, okay, then you can take the highest.
Okay, back to the dollars. This is very helpful for me because when I just looked at what was in our packet, I was kind of doing some things in the margin and kind of came to the same conclusion that we were going to go up like 5% year 1 and then 2% thereafter, which is in line with our increases from the past. However, something we've talked about at least the last 2 years as a commission is that we as a district are historically we are the top line of this. You've seen this. And our peer districts are down here, and that cumulative effect can be as high as $100 to $130 million that we as a district are spending over every year our peers in salaries. And so I was hoping that this was going to, this whole process, that would be included in this whole process. And if I would like to ask that we redo this with a 100 million lower and see what the impact is, because as an example of when we continue to spend $100 million over our peers, other programs are being shorted. And in the 2010 cuts, we talked about cutting $110 million. I think we ended up cutting like 65 or 70. But the $110 million, we lost, under that scenario, 1,300 positions.
So in that chart that you just showed, is that just teachers or that's all
No, this
positions?
is just this is the
The ERG?
this is just teachers, and this is not ERG. We've got another thing. ERG is Education Resources Group, which compares all the school districts, and I can show you that data. But because I think I was given the backup data for this slide, but it's 2 years old. But I can't think that we've closed the gap because we gave an increase. But I just have this overall concern that, I say this every time, but teachers don't make enough money. And I love paying the higher performers more money and things, and doing something that's just completely different in compensation. But I still have this concern that historically DISD has paid so much more than our peers. And people say, well, the DISD teachers deserve it because we don't give them copy paper and we don't give them, So why are we compensating in pay instead of giving them the tools and materials they need to be effective teachers?
Well, while you're thinking about that, I also see that when they took a look at the teachers in the districts, in the various districts, and they rated us the way they did, I was wondering if they actually thought about all of the special teachers we have, because they took all of the teachers and rated, divided it by the salaries or whatever to come up with the fact that we are paying our teachers more. But do we have more bilingual teachers? Do we have more special ed teachers than most school districts? Because they didn't actually pull those teachers out and compare what special teachers that they had in other districts. So I don't know how this report
Like looking at
is
just
measurable.
core or
Right,
something.
right. And I don't think, because when I talked to one of the guys afterwards, he said, no, they just took all teachers and divided. So do we have more special teachers, Because it was based on the number of kids and all of that. And some of our teachers have like 15, 7, because they're in special programs. So, I don't know.
I think that chart you're looking at is just our flat salary schedule, year 1 all the way to year 40. And what does Irving, what does San Antonio, what does El Paso pay it each year, and what do we pay, and the difference across.
But we did another
Relative
analysis actually using ERG data, and that said in comparing to our peers, and then we picked different peers, but our teachers are 7% higher than the peer group, but because we have so many more teachers, that works out to $97 million. Our teachers' aides are 39% over the peer group, but again, we have a higher number of teachers' aides, and both our ratios are lower. And so that adds up to $20 million. Our principals are only 3% higher, and we have fewer principals. So I would just like us to I would like to see us look at all those factors, because there's a lot of money there.
Well, we talked about teaching assistants just the other day in a meeting I was in with my team. Somebody's going to have to make a tough call one year, though, to cut everybody down. And like the implications of such. So if you say TAs are overpaid, right? Philosophically in education, people are like, TAs are helping, they're not making a lot of money. Like, that is kind of the emotional side of it. So in order to be able to adjust in this new model, the salary floor with incoming teachers will start to take care of it over time. But in order to really cut this number down, there would have to be a hard decision made to say, teaching assistants, we're reducing everybody's pay by X number of percent. And based on the conversations I've had, we're not there yet.
Well, but and that could be for another discussion, but another factor in it is that we have more teachers' aides than other districts.
Right.
We tried that with
Might be.
custodians not
A
too long.
lot of those teachers say
Think
We see how that went.
Title I funds.
And then you mentioned,
Principals opt to do that, to have help on the campus, and they pay them out of Title I.
I mean, and then you mentioned the custodial situation where our custodial costs are higher. But, we've got a librarian sitting back there, but 2 years ago we cut librarians and counselors. And we cut librarians more and then added back librarians and cut counselors. So I don't know. Jim, what do you think about asking for this with just a what if?
Well, I'm very sympathetic to the point, okay, because someone with kids in the school district, these things come at a cost, right? Whether it's overpaying more than the market rate for custodians means fewer teachers in the classroom,
And sometimes fewer
or
custodians.
fewer custodians, or fewer counselors, or fewer librarians. You have to look at it in those terms, all right? And so I don't know. I mean, it's possible that the data we saw are incorrect, okay? But otherwise, to say, gee, do we need to be paying as much because of what we're giving up to do that, right? And of course, echo Louisa's point, would love to pay teachers more generally, but at the same time want to deliver value for the kids. And one of my hobby horses is on the writing side, because of the way we're staffed, particularly at middle school and high school, you cannot effectively teach kids how to write because you're a middle school teacher, you've got 175 students or so, you can't give an essay and really give a kid individual attention. They don't learn how to write. That the cost of these other programs means, we could have done something about writing, for up to me. But so it would really be good, I think, not just to look, okay, at our novice teachers and entry-level positions, which was good to look at, but to look at the whole picture and make sure that, we're delivering good value.
And the flip side of his writing example, which I agree with, is with better technology, we could increase class sizes and have fewer teachers, but we're not able to make that investment because we're tight in our number one component, being salaries, or we're over. But and then one other thing we're behind on is deferred maintenance. So
What's deferred maintenance, just for my...
repairing the schools,
Okay.
keeping them up. Just we wait for a bond and fix what we can instead of doing things proactively to keep things working. We wait till it breaks. We wait till it breaks.
Okay.
And then triage, because we can't fix everything that's broken. And so that's a pushback on why we pay more than our peers. But I say, well, let's make their living environment a little more comfortable.
So I haven't seen the data that you're referring to. I'd love to take a look at it and study it a little bit more, and then I guess I just want to clarify. So when you're talking about this chart, wherever it was,
We would
is it about setting the? I guess it's one of two things, right? It's either lowering the salaries or changing the target distribution. Is that in order to get this, make it $100 million?
I just think we need some scenarios.
model out a few teacher progressions from 1 to 40 years and say where would their salary fall along this career path and compare it with other districts.
Or maybe the simple way is to assume no step increases. Well, that's not. You know what I'm talking about. We just need scenarios, I think.
Definitely, say on average, a teacher that's going to be here for 35 years, this is how they're going to progress along the model. If we apply these salaries to their career progression as they are today and compare it with our peer districts, see where they would stand. that gap I would imagine is going to grow because these salaries are higher than they are now.
That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to keep the M&O percentage at the peer percentage. How about that?
Okay.
It's not. Yeah, I'm all for paying. I love. We don't know, but this scenario shows our M&O backing up.
This is not exactly a realistic revenue scenario either. If you notice,
Sure.
the bullet point below each of these say no anticipated revenue increase. I mean, our property values are going to climb. Our revenue is going to climb as well. It's just saying keeping our M&O constant. This is what our percentage would be, at the worst case scenario. But definitely, we don't anticipate even next year our revenues to stay where they are.
I love the idea of attracting the best teachers because we're paying $65,000. No one else is. But I like the overall pot of money to be consistent with our peers so that we can do all these other things that we have put on hold for year after year.
I think it would have to be a global picture, like looking at TAs, APs, because like the
Exactly.
whole, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It can't be tackled, and Brian, before you start running scenarios,
true.
it can't be tackled in just the teacher model. And so we would have to look and, Milan, have a larger conversation around if this is the direction we want to go in. We know principal compensation is another component that's going to increase, right? Where are we willing to balance that out or even subtract in order to move in that direction?
And
Is there a program, that will assist our teacher assistants to go get higher education? Like if they're a teacher assistant and they may have some college.
We have an MOU with Texas Tech right now for them to enter that program and get full teaching certification and their degree.
All of them know that?
I mean, it's been pushed out multiple times because I've pushed it, but there are certain sacrifices that have to be made in order to pursue a degree and not have it take you 5 to 7 years. You're going to have to stop working at a certain point to take the plunge to finish the degree to get the certification. So there are trade-offs, but there are programs that offer it that we partner with.
Another reason, if I could finish this scenario, another reason to have the different scenarios is if we hit another 2010.
The
Right,
state
that's-
cutting funds.
Right.
Well, not just this. I mean, you mentioned property values are going to go up, and yes, we know that in the near term, right? But we've also seen bubbles where it goes the other way, right? And in terms of the sustainability of this, I have to say I have a real concern when I look at, the 2015, 26. Well, it really maps it out for the next 4 years, right? And you're talking about, the total salary and benefits, going up by $30 million, right? It's not contemplating the possibility, say, of a recession, right? And I don't know you've got the flexibility in this. Once you've committed to this, okay, you can't back off, right? You'll have a huge problem if you can't do what we are telling people to do.
Yeah.
Incentive system, right? So,
We do have some in the slideshow if we ever continue it. We do have some points in there of ways that we can ensure the sustainability, one of which is not progressing anyone to the next level. We have that option certainly to keep everyone where they're at for another year, and we're under no obligation to move everybody forward every year or even a set percentage of them forward every year. So we could at least hold the cost where we're at, given.
I would like,
Lucy's
Carmen.
turn.
I'm sorry. Carmen, do you have any idea, maybe he would, how many of the teachers you have now who are making in the 70s? Because I do know that there are teachers who are making
Yeah.
pay, which making about $76,000 a year currently. Okay. Do you know how many of those teachers we actually have at that level?
It's in there.
We have a slide,
Oh, it's right here.
slide number 29, page 15.
Okay.
The number you gave, 70,000, we have a range there from 65 to 74.
65 to 74.
About 8% of our teachers.
8% of your teachers now are making that amount. What page is that again?
Slide 29.
Page 15 on here.
29.
We don't. Our slides are. Oh, slide. Okay. Okay, I
Page
see.
15.
Yep, page 15. In the back. Yeah.
To page 15.
I wouldn't be making anything because I can't even find the page number.
We would
One, two.
we would let you pick your other
strings.
Your other yes.
Okay, all right. So it's the one for teachers, okay, distribution.
Wow.
So we have, okay,
So this really shows that we have a very young teaching population.
Correct.
right,
And by young, you have to say young to the profession.
Yes.
Mhm.
right. Okay,
Meaning that we have the population isn't necessarily young. We've had a lot come in under alternative certification. Okay.
so you already have about over 30%
If you notice on
population making
the model that I
more
was
than-
just talking to you about,
more than 50%.
we're saying our turnover of novice employees going into this, we're going to have 1,063 new people that are novice. So that meaning new to the profession. In 15, 16, we're going to have 1,000 individuals coming into the district.
So this is actually going to be an incentive for new people and not.
They'll make a lot more. Yes.
That's the point. Attract the best.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking of maybe the 30% already sort of, okay. So they're not
Right.
Sorry. Well, I want to zero in on that. You say make a lot more, right? The potential is there, but if you're looking at the numbers in aggregate, they're not going to be making a lot more than other districts.
You would be making much more than if you went by a step schedule in another district and you're highly effective here.
Right. But at the same time, your model is assuming that most are not.
It depends where you are in terms of experience, right? And so if you were a proficient 2 teacher, but only have 4 years of experience, and you look back at what that salary was, which is 59. So to make 59,000
It would have taken you more than 15 years on this
in another
schedule.
system, or and so I think it just varies, kind of where you are.
I understand the potential is there, right?
Okay.
But at the same time, the only we're really not. Your model contemplates that the growth in overall compensation basically mirrors what we would have been spending anyway under regular expectations of increases, salary increases, overall compensation increases. So you're going to pay for the high performers by paying half the population less. Ultimately, right. There's an initial investment, your term, right? Because you're not going to drop salaries on anybody. But
I wouldn't say half, Jim, and the reason why I'd say that is because even on, let's say if you have a bell curve, right, the left side of the bell curve is still making more money than what they would in this current model.
right, but the right side has got to be making less. I mean, unless you're changing the proportion of the district budget that you're putting into teacher salaries, all right, you're moving dollars around within the budget. Okay, I mean, so in that sense, I mean, from a budget perspective, that's not a bad thing because that's just, as long as we don't run into a recession or things like that, it's what we would have been spending anyway, right? But from a teacher's perspective, I'm not sure unless you're prepared to shift the distribution over time of folks that are, missing from proficient, getting to proficient 2 and proficient 3, then.
So it's like if we start doing a really great job,
Moving them up over here.
hiring
Increasing.
excellent teachers, so we start shifting that bell curve to the right.
Right.
So then we're going to have a financial question to ask about where do we get the rest more money.
So
that
yeah, so that's a good way to think about it. And I want to tie it into your point. The whole idea here, of course, is to improve student achievement. So let's map out what your goals are in terms of student achievement to what the distribution of teacher effectiveness ratings is. So if the student achievement is rising and you're not moving the distribution curve, you're going to have a problem. So
And there has to be
so I think we ought to see some sensitivity analyses that ought to be tied into what are the goals, whether it's in 2020 already or what it would look like if it were, and what ought the distribution of teacher compensation or teacher effectiveness ratings look like, and what does that imply? What are the numbers that fall out of that? Am I saying?
Yeah, that makes sense. You have to put a footnote there for 18 to 20% attrition. So this is also assuming a stabilized teaching force that is going to exist for 15, 20 years, which is not the teaching force anymore.
But your attrition is going to come at the lower performing levels.
It'll come at both
Because if
ends.
people are doing well,
No,
they're going
I-
to want to stay, and you're going to want them to stay.
But that's assuming they come in, but you've got remember you have the people who are the blue, right? They're not, they're,
They're capped.
They're
The capped, initially capped folks.
But
It's only for 2 years.
well, there should be some attrition of those that are on the high end of the scale right now and their performance doesn't match.
Are those the pink people?
Okay, but over time, that effect will go away,
Correct.
right? So again, I'm thinking, let's look at 2020. Let's not look at 15, 16, or, let's look at 2020. Where do we think we want to be in terms of student achievement? Okay, if we were to achieve our goals, and if you're going to align teacher compensation to that and teacher evaluations to that, then I think you need to look at the budget consequences of that. What does it potentially look like if we are successful?
That's why I was curious too about Finland, because so there's a model as I understand it where they
Change
have
these percentages.
outstanding teachers and lots of them, and the kids are doing really well. So do they pay by merit, and what does that look like? Because I would think that's where we want to go, right? We would love to have all our teachers be just
We have a different budget system than they do, but
right, but still to. I mean, is there some other model that?
I mean, we can easily, model this out and say if we're achieving our goals coming into 2020 and our base should be progressing, they're no longer 25% progressing to, they're actually 25% proficient to. So we can easily model those percentages out and see, copying this year by year, what does it look like? We just have
And
to have the
another-
debate on, where that shift is going to occur and to what.
and another way that people roll off, but not to the same degree, is that they move into administration.
And I don't want to underestimate Carmen's point too, with instructional coaches, administration, getting married and moving, like all those things, cost some. But it's still a fair point. I think want us to be cognizant that it's and the fact that you can only move one level at a time does sort of damper how fast that curve's going to move.
And I think if you do have a highly effective teaching force, which I think we're all in agreement, we're not there yet. If you have a highly effective teaching force, to Milan's previous point, you completely reallocate your district funds in terms of how things operate. I mean, everything would look differently as well to support
But
this.
I think I'd like to understand the budget implications.
And Susan looked up Houston a minute ago, and you said 50% instruction, and we don't know if that's apples to apples and the number we have here today. They may have principals in there and so on. But let's say it was apples to apples, I would still say that they are ahead of us on keeping up with the things that we're deficient in terms of deferred maintenance. And so that's what makes me want to scale this back just a little bit so that we don't keep. I just feel like over the years, my years of experience, I've seen us in well-meaning goodwill. Let's give a teacher raise, and we won't fund fill in the blank, and we're just in a sad situation in a lot of areas.
I have a related question, because so much of this is predicated, again, on the assumption that we're going to provide outstanding support services to teachers for this process of teacher excellence initiative. That and there's two pieces of it. One of them is the assessment piece of the teachers, and the other is the support services then to grow the teachers. Is there some kind of evaluation and support services built in to this, or is that a completely separate? Because it seems to me that if we want all this to happen, but if we're not doing a great job on those two areas, on evaluating reliably and accurately, and also then providing the support services, so is there a evaluation process similar to this that's going to be in place, like our administrators or operational kinds of thing going to get, our teachers going to give student feedback kind of things to the folks that are supposedly helping them do their jobs?
I can speak to that a little bit. And so there's multiple parts to that. And part of it, of course, is when we look at the professional development, we want so much of it obviously to happen on campus. So it's about supporting those principals to make sure that they're leading effectively, they're coaching effectively. And so that's actually already in place. I mean, we only have a year of experience under our belts in terms of holding principals, sort of accountable, but then also supporting principals so that they become, more effective coaches. And it's very explicit in their evaluation. It's explicit in their, actually, what the data I was just looking at, like their mid-year, kind of evaluations. I mean, the whole section is just on, their instructional feedback. And so that's one level. The second level above the principals is with the executive directors. So the executive directors, we've also put in place a new evaluation for them. That's also about how are they supporting principals at that level. The third piece is around the evaluation of the program. And so that, and I wish Dr. Smisko was here. So what we've also talked about is evaluating the supporting excellence piece. And so we've started to come up with some metrics, some indicators of success for each of these components as well, and how we evaluate that. A lot of it's also based on survey data of teachers, and that's something that we want to look at. Of course, survey data of principals, like I do principals feel that we're supporting them in supporting teachers.
And so where does that fall in the budget? Is that something that's going to be just sort of redistributing funds that are already being spent to do things, or doing it more efficiently, or is that a new cost?
And Dr. Smisko should probably answer that question. My sense is that it's not going to be a substantially larger cost to engage in those activities. But I don't want to speak for her.
Thanks.
Yeah.
The last brain cramp question I have is, right now we do comparability for Title I funding based on headcount, I believe, because we can't do it based on dollars because we would not be compliant. But Houston does budget by campus, by dollars. And so, and that has been something we've talked about as an ideal as a commission, to give principals more flexibility. Say they want to experiment and put 40 teachers in a class and not be bound by 40 students in a class. Not be 40.
That's a great education.
But not be constrained by all these formulas that come from central office, and they choose to be more innovative. They can do that if they're budgeting by dollars, and but I could see where that would be a problem in our lower performing campuses. If we're incentivizing the higher paid teachers to go there, then that could constrain our ability to budget by dollars.
That's correct. I wasn't familiar with the concept of comparability until I came here, because we were completely decentralized. So you have X number of dollars and you get to distribute them as you see fit to lead to the most effective possible scenario at your school. But yes, if you move in this direction, it would definitely put some constraints on how you would even consider decentralizing a budget.
I will say the comparability, the scrutiny on that procedure as a whole has definitely increased over the last 3 to 4 years. So
Oh, yeah.
it wasn't as much of an issue in Dallas as it wasn't in Houston, at least in the recent few years ago. So it is something new.
So, one particular piece of information I'd like to request is, obviously there's some step in, or whatever percentage compensation increases built into your model. I'd like to look at just what those are relative to what they've been over the last 10 or 15 years to see, how that stacks up against actual historical experience.
We can definitely model out, progressions and compare it in that approach also.
And then, just so I'm clear, over the course of the 4 or 5 years that you've modeled here, you're assuming a constant performance distribution. Correct. Okay.
We do have the dilemma with the recent years is that we haven't had step increases, but we've had other increases. And so the last question, I guess, is, so you mentioned at the beginning that there's some consideration to come to the board for an increase outside of this compensation system?
It's possible.
Oh, but it's not live.
It's not solidified. We're not doing budget development quite yet for 14-15. That'll take place February, March.
Are you talking about the every 3 years evaluating the schedule?
You're talking about next
Specifically
year.
mean 14-15.
Just something that I may have misunderstood back when all this started was that so that we could afford it, we would hold salaries. That we gave an increase last year, and then somewhere in the discussion today, a comment was made about giving an increase this year. So then our base continues to grow, and that gap of where we're not addressing other needs continues to grow.
Because like Carmen said, we haven't started the budget development process yet. It'll start in February to determine if an increase will be given next year.
But to your point, even this past year, I know you're aware of this already, but comp had put basically a hold in place that if you're over the max of your salary range, you would not get the increase because it leads to more problems like this. But then it was approved that people over the max would get the increase.
Right.
And so those types of decisions further exacerbate this inflation where we end up way over. So even controls that we put in place as a district, we really have to stick to, or we end up even further and further out of the realm that arguably we should be in the first place.
Right. But this is how we got into the trouble of paying custodians more than other custodians make, and how we pay teachers' aides more than other teachers. It was this inertia that, the only direction was up. And, there are consequences in other, I understand at the personal level it's painful, but at the same time, at the instructional level, from a student's perspective, it's inefficient.
It's the battle I fight every day, managing compensation, right? People always come back to me. This isn't enough. We need more. This salary scale is too low, etc. Implementing the controls around comp is a huge, huge issue that I want to acknowledge, and I completely agree with you. If we can't shift, and it's an entire district philosophy about what is the priority here, and if we say the priority is teachers, you have to give something up somewhere else.
I think because we've watched that happen just in the last year, and it comes before the board, and it's a bucket of money, but no one has presented how it impacts this or this. And so I think my recommendation is just to have an ongoing dynamic model that shows if you input this, everything shifts this way.
Makes sense.
So this has been great.
A question about just the total number of teachers. So the talking about going basically a 5% increase in the number of teachers from this year to next year. Is that right?
We're keeping it flat at
population.
10,527 all
I'm looking at the 2013-14 actual estimate that says 10,000 teachers.
That's actual means actually filled. And at the time, whenever we completed this some months ago, that was our actual filled employee rate. I know in the recent months we've done a significant amount of hiring in that area.
So this is really not budget.
Correct. That's what we anticipate our salary savings to be, our actual number of teachers during our PEAM snapshot, which is the official that we send to the state. That's where we were at that time, and what that vacancy rate would have churned into for salary numbers. So if you see the salary, we said $507 million. That was a $10 million salary savings for those, around 500 teachers.
So you increased student population this year up to almost 160?
It went up 781 students from last fall to
Okay,
this fall.
so
yeah.
that,
Actual PEAM.
right. So you had to add more teachers, or did you have the slots already available for those 700 students?
Well, I mean, it could be, there's enrollment by campus, so
By campus, yeah.
Depends on how, but generally, yes, we would be adding teachers. This model, since normally when our student population increases, the revenue follows the students in. So this model, assuming our student population to be constant, if it did increase, we would get additional
You get
revenues.
so much money per student per day, right?
Which I just whispered to Jim, another performance criteria could be student attendance, because we lose a lot of money by not having the student attendance that our peers have.
Teacher attendance.
Both.
So from a big picture budget perspective, notionally, we're not planning on we're not planning on cutting anything else to pay for the compensation side. It's what we were expecting in revenue growth anyway. So expecting what we were going to pay in teacher compensation anyway. About the the 8 million or so that we're planning to spend for professional development support. How do we pay for that?
I mean, the chiefs haven't gotten together. I mean, like Carmen said, we'll start the budget development in February. All the chiefs will come together at the table, and they'll align their goals with the district action plans, and then kind of they'll eliminate purpose, as they mentioned, to achieve those goals.
Like the DMC contract ends this spring, so that free ups X number of funds that have been encumbered for the past 3 years. So there are going to be trade-offs throughout that process, which we'll hash out in the next 8 weeks or so.